Oh man, I gotta fight a little girl? That's pretty messed up, but she's got no chance. Let's do this. Alright, what you got? You coming at me with your fists? Yeah, you better guard. Come on, Razzie, what you got? Oh shit, little girl's got hands! Welcome to Abandoned Save, where I highlight the good, not legendary games of the past that you forgot about and left that save in the dust. Remember back in the dark times when games would come out in Japan and we would get them over here in the West way later? Things like Dragon Ball Z, which first aired in Japan in 1989, and we started seeing it in the US 7 years later in 1996, or even the original Pokemon games, which were released in the US 2 years after they were released in Japan. Well, in the case of the Summon Night series, the first thing we ever got in the US was the spinoff series Swordcraft Story, coming out 3 years after it did in Japan, and 6 years after the original game came out for the PS1. The original Summon Night series is a tactics RPG, where you summon creatures and fight alongside them in grid-based battles. But this is a series where most of the early entries are almost entirely inaccessible for the Western audience. They've been re-released on the DS and PSP, but have never been officially ported over here. So why Atlas was contracted to localize the spin-off series specifically, I have no idea. But it's actually a really great game that's overlooked most likely for all the reasons I just described. Not to mention the series itself is pretty much dead with no new game for almost 10 years at this point. Let's take a look. Like most GBA RPGs, you get to pick a boy or a girl as your character to start the game. Unlike most of these games though, this actually does change a significant amount of dialogue. It doesn't affect the overall story at all, but it does make the characters feel distinct, which things like Mass Effect would be praised for several years later. The game starts by being gaslit by your own mother until you get out of bed, so this character really is like me. It goes through the typical RPG stuff where you name your character, and I'm just going to be lazy and give myself my real name. Though it does start with a canon name for the especially lazy, and our mother is named Amorous, which she also tries to gaslight us about. Blink 3 times if you need help, little Nick. We also learn that our character is a craft knight learning to forge weapons. Amorous and the MC then have a real quick lore dump, telling us there's been a lot of earthquakes lately, today is the start of the tournament to decide the next craft lord, and that means that person will be given the task of guarding the sacred spirit Parista. Jesus, does everyone in this world wake up in the morning and tell each other their life story? I get that a lot of RPGs start out this way, but this exposition dump is definitely one of the weaker ways to do it. Also, our father has apparently won the tournament in the past, so I guess he was a craft lord. Amorous gives us a lucky charm of our father's and sends us on our way to join the tournament. Our character here has apparently never been inside the central tower of the city, which is like 30 feet away from his house. Interesting life he's led. We also meet up with our master Braun of the Silver Guild on the way, who tells us to head there after the opening ceremony. And we run into this woman who is very beautiful, so says the game, and she acts like a total creep. Before the ceremony starts, you have to talk to everyone around you, where you can learn about the guardian beasts that help craft knights forge weapons, and you can also clearly tell who the main characters are in the room. This is our introduction to 3 of the craft lords, starting with Lubert, the most evil-looking motherfucker the GBA could render, Urexa in his finest Naruto cosplay, and Sakuro, the one all the ladies like. Then we learn it's been 3 years since the disappearance of our father Shintetsu, and another craft knight, Tiram, has also gone missing, so the tournament is to find their replacement. Why they specifically want a child in this super important position, we'll never know. We'll be competing in fights with weapons we craft until someone wins or their weapon breaks, which I suppose makes a lot of sense for a tournament between smiths. You also get a partner during combat, but it doesn't explicitly specify that partner has to be a guardian beast, which is an interesting detail. They give us permission to enter the dungeon beneath the central tower as well, which will be the main dungeon of the game and how you collect resources to craft your weapons. There's monsters in there, and if you die, well then, you clearly weren't worthy, so too fucking bad, kid, that's on you. They probably aren't even going to go get your body out of there. And we don't get to know our opponent until right before the fight. That was a whole lot of information right off the bat, so now we have to head over to our guild. You have complete freedom to run around the city at this point and talk to random people, but besides a bit of world building and this terrible pun, there really isn't much of a point in doing that. Cat! Later in the game, you can find some quests by doing this, which give you techniques for better weapons, but it's really not worth doing, nor is it interesting. We finally meet up with our master, who is a great inspirer of confidence, and he invites us over to his room, where a strange man he calls a summoner is waiting. The summoner is going to summon a guardian beast for us and asks a few questions. There are 4 different guardian beasts that you can get depending on how you answer, and based on my answers, he summoned Rasho with the good luck charm from earlier. You can name them as you please, but I kept the default name. Each different guardian beast has their own dialogue and personality, and Rasho here is a bit abrasive and doesn't like Braun, but he agrees to be our partner after learning we are the son of Shintetsu, because we'll later learn that whatever beast you summon also happens to have been the same one your father had. At least I think. That might only be Rasho, but it's hard to find concrete answers on this game. For some reason, the one that I got the last time I played this, Sugar, is the most popular of these, who is in love with your character and gets jealous all the time when you spend time with other characters. She also kisses you, but only if you picked the girl character. So there's that. You can speak to your guardian beast at any time by pressing select, and this is really the game's mechanic for reminding you what you're supposed to be doing at any given time, a necessary feature for a handheld game that's not really meant to be played in large bursts. We go up to our own personal workshop where we're going to live for the duration of the tournament, and we decide to take a stroll with our new partner. This game has a really weird relationship with these guardian beasts. First of all, they call them beasts, but besides that, they summon them from the beast's world into theirs, and then make them work for them with no compensation whatsoever, and they're just happy to do that? They even mentioned that there are stray summons in the labyrinth, which are summons that have lost or become upset with their summoner and left, which makes this whole thing seem even more like an unwilling arrangement. Regardless, Braun gives us our first weapon technique, but we need to go get some iron ore from the shop first, which he gives us some money to procure. So we head off to the shop, but they say they're all out of stock, and the red-headed girl from the opening ceremony has bought it all. So we go over and politely ask her to sell us some. You know, I heard you bought all those iron ores, and I could really use some of those. So, I mean, considering we're guildmates and all, I was thinking maybe you could give me some of them? Please, 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 please. But she calls us a slowpoke, declines, and walks off. Sorry, little Nick. You get used to it after a while. Obviously, we go straight back to Braun to ask him what the deal is, and he tells us the mean girl must have been Sanary, another contestant and a member of our guild. He won't take sides since she's also his apprentice, so he gets the bright idea of sending us into the dungeon with just our smithing hammer, because a hammer can forge a man. Okay, well, I guess we don't have any other father figure around. So, straight into the dungeon we go. This is going to represent the main gameplay loop. Go into the dungeon to get materials to craft weapons back in your room. The GBA can only handle so much, so if you don't like one deep dungeon as the main focus, this game isn't for you. There is more than just that, but only a bit. Now inside the dungeon, you can get into random battles that play out almost like a fighting game, where you and the enemies are on a 2D plane. You can jump, attack, and use your Guardian Beast abilities, which right now is just Guard. And if you don't have any weapons equipped, you're forced to use your hammer. You can even get a cross-up on an enemy if you time a jump attack just right, or a perfect guard, like it's Street Fighter or something, and back attacks do extra damage. What the game doesn't tell you, though, is that if you battle with your hammer, the drop rates of items are hugely increased, so you can actually use it to your advantage if you have the patience to fight things with the hammer, which I do not, so I'm never going to do that. You also gain XP for both yourself and your Guardian Beast after every fight, and when you level up, your stats all raise, and it leaves you 1 point to allocate for yourself, like many RPGs. The Guardian Beasts simply get a higher magic stat and learn more spells as they level up. We eventually run back into Sanary, who enjoys the underwater aquarium here in the labyrinth. Her sister apparently used to take her here, and it has sentimental value to her. Once you see that scene and get the chest nearby, that's as far as you can go on this visit, as you now have enough materials to craft your first weapon. So we make our way back to the forge, and you can turn any item into materials, including any weapons you've crafted, though you don't get all the materials back when you do this, and we craft the sword weapon that Braun taught us earlier. But you can see that there are also axes, spears, knuckles, and drills available, though we'll try the others out later. Once we craft the weapon, we can see its name and stats, the Novice Knife. All that work to make a basic knife, and now Sanary is here to bug us again, and while she's at it, we get our first opponent, Chaves. Chavez? Probably Chavez, but I'm going to call him Chaves. You then get to pick one more technique to learn, and since it's the most unique, I'm going to go with Drill. But I don't have enough materials to craft it, so I'm not going to get it right now. While this game works on a day system, you're in complete control of the passage of time. It only moves when you move the story along, so after Mom comes back and Rochelle is surprisingly cordial towards her, we equip the knife and go ahead back into the dungeon. We were given a key for the dungeon earlier, and that will act as your gatekeeper to force you to move the story along. So each time I visit the labyrinth, I'm going to reach as far as I'm allowed to before I leave, picking up all the chests I see and fighting all the battles I can along the way. The knife is much faster in combat and does way more damage too, so it moves along much quicker. There are also boxes scattered around that you can break with your hammer for a chance at an item like the little destructive menace of an RPG protagonist you are. The combat, especially against regular enemies like this, boils down to pretty much attacking a couple times and then guarding when your turn is over. It's very simple, but it's a GBA RPG with 4 whole buttons to work with, so I get it. I used Rasho's Enchant Fire spell while I was in here for the first time as well, which does exactly what you would expect. And the way the magic works is that you can select 4 spells or items in any combination to assign to your Guardian Beast and then use them with B in combat. But you only get 5 casts of anything per battle, and each spell has so many uses per rest you take, depending on the spell and what level you are to keep it balanced. Eventually we get down a couple floors and reach the teleporter, which can take you back to any other teleporter you have unlocked, and the man blocking our progress, so I leave. We now have our novice drill and equip it before heading off to our first match of the tournament against Chaves, who decides not to use his Guardian Beast. So besides our health, there's also a green meter that represents weapon durability in battle. Attacking reduces it a bit, but blocking reduces it much more, and if you lose all weapon durability, you lose, which is the specialty of the drill. It's not the best damage dealer, but it destroys weapons really quickly, and if you do that to a boss, you also learn the technique to create their weapon, which the game never tells you, so I hope you decided to try it out at least once, or you're going to miss out on some of the most unique and powerful weapons in the game. Chaves claims no contest because we used a Guardian Beast, but tough titty bro, that was your choice and you lost. Lady Killer Judge agrees. That ends the first day, and we then get to choose someone to hang out with, but our only choices right now are Rasho and Sanary. I choose to meet up with our character's little girlfriend at the aquarium, which the game ships really hard, though you don't have to lean into it if you don't want to. This is a Tumblr-free zone. At the start of the next day, Braun meets up with us and tells us we have to go with him to Vance to sell some weapons. At the beginning of each day, the game's going to have some story mission to go on of varying length and quality to mix up the gameplay and prevent it from being dungeon, tournament fight the whole game. There isn't much here, as this is more of an introduction, though apparently they do have a Waffle House. Everywhere has a Waffle House. So we drop off the weapons and head on back, getting our next sword technique in the process. Braun will always give you the latest sword technique at some point during a day, but you are not required to craft it to receive another technique, unlike everything else. That does force you to grind if you don't specialize in something just to get the materials to keep up, because that man will not forget if you haven't crafted the latest weapon technique you took from him, and he will hold it against you until you do, like an angry lover. With that in mind, I'm mostly going to specialize in axes and drills, with a few swords and spears here and there. On our way out of the harbor, someone from the Gold Guild stops us and tells us he'd like to buy some weapons we craft, 10 of the new sword, then takes off. That being said, we don't have time to decide anything for that because we now have access to more of the labyrinth. I started messing around with the drill in here and discovered you could do special attacks by holding the A button, but they take so long to charge and you can be interrupted, so it's just not worth it. On the way down, we run into Sanary and find out that she was also given the same offer from the Gold Guild, and she asked what we're going to do. I told her I wasn't going to sell out to a rival guild, which she gets upset about in natural tsundere fashion because she definitely decided to take the deal. Now is a good time to mention you can also equip up to 3 weapons at a time and cycle through them in a fight with L. So a weapon breaking isn't an instant loss in the labyrinth. You can only use 1 weapon in tournament fights, but the labyrinth allows all 3. Even losing all your weapons just reverts you to the hammer and you can keep fighting, but you really don't want to let that happen because if a weapon does break, you can only recoup some of the materials you used to make it at the forge. It's otherwise completely lost. Rasho also learned the aptly named healing spell while I was in here, which I'm going to use throughout the entire game. At this point, I'm ready to tell the Gold Guild I ain't no snitch, and then run into a blonde jerk who tells us we suck and that he's going to win the tournament. Too bad for him, he doesn't have plot armor. Sanary stops us before we can start the next tournament fight though to tell us that the Gold Guild uses Craft Knights to buy cheap, low-quality weapons and then sells them overseas for huge profits. Not surprising at all, but they're preying on kids that are just happy someone is telling them their work is good, and we get the chance to either go take the weapons back or ignore it. So of course I can't stand for that and I head off with her to stop it. They obviously don't want to give them back, and lurking in the shadows is that blonde dickhead from earlier, Varel, who's part of the Gold Guild, and he agrees to fight over the weapons. This is basically an extra free boss fight if you chose to go do this, and I had the spear equipped, so there's no way I'm going to be able to break his weapon. He also has fucking perfect spacing. Somebody get this guy at Evo. If I couldn't cheat and heal myself in combat, there's no way I would have won. With him defeated, they give up the weapons, which also means that if you did sell them to him, it was only a net benefit as you get to keep the money and you would have gotten them back to break down and get some of the materials back too. Should have known nice guys always finish last. Regardless, we're now going to face off against Keenan in the tournament, whose guardian beast is this fucking thing. He uses it and a really strong axe and is actually a pretty difficult fight, doing really insane damage, and I got my ass handed to me. Let me try the knuckles out this time. Okay, never doing that again. So this time I'm going to go in with a drill and just bust the axe instead of trying to fight him straight up. The game tries to tell you this is the more technical way to play, but it is absolutely the easiest 90% of the time. Varel watched our fight and was impressed, so he declares himself our rival, and we get to hang out with someone again. Spoiler, I'm going to choose Sanary every time, I just like her more than the other characters. Nothing much happens this time, and in the morning, Braun wakes us up to tell us his niece Razzie has gone missing in the labyrinth somewhere, and he needs our help to find her. We were going to go back down there anyway, so doing it for the story kills two birds with one stone. I found the hole that Razzie is definitely waiting down, and we run into the beautiful lady and a glowing sword. She tells us that the crafter of the sword saved the city, and it's been 3 years since. So clearly it's one of our father's swords, but we won't be learning anything else about it right now. We do a little digging, and here's Razzie with a whole ass room in the labyrinth. She was just living it up while stuck, at least. She was blocked off by a huge spider monster and can't fight it anymore, so we're gonna do it for her. It does a lot of damage, but so does Keenan's axe, and we clear the way. Razzie decides to call you Big Bro from this point on and takes off, but not before I stole her bed to heal up. She also lets us know that she's participating in the tournament as well and hopes we can fight later. Turns out we're stuck down here, but luckily Sanary heard about our rescue attempt and came prepared with a rope ladder to get us out of the hole that we dove straight into with no plan at all. Sanary gives us our letter for the next match and leaves with Razzie, so we take a look at it, and of course, Razzie is going to be our next opponent. First we rescued her, and now we have to kick her butt as a reward. Our character had noted that Razzie had definitely weakened the spider monster before we fought, and she is no pushover. Razzie is the casual filter. She is the hardest fight in this game and goes absolutely nuts with her knuckle weapon. I got whooped once, then I came at her with the axe and totally destroyed her. Wasn't close at all. You have to find her to console her afterwards, which is really just a way to make sure you know about the secret entrance to the Craft Lord's quarters on the 3rd floor. This is also a miniature stealth section, and these guards are damn near omniscient. They don't have a vision cone, they have all-seeing eyes. It took me several tries, but I finally got past them when I realized I was going for the wrong staircase. With that, our next match is set first thing in the morning this time, against the twins Ariel and Mariel. Somehow, this is the only time the option of having a partner other than a guardian beast is going to come up. They work together. They're members of our own guild, but like everything else in this world, we don't know them. They're also a bit rude. There's another earthquake, and then we're sent down into the labyrinth to get some new materials. They didn't give us the next key though, so we have to go asking around for it, and it seems to be held by Master Sakuro, so we go to his house to ask about it. He's decided that we need to go through some training first and sends us out to go get some items for him. In return, he gives us a technique to go craft, which it turns out is a ladle. This is some real Mr. Miyagi shit, isn't it? After all that, we're still not done either, as he sends us out for some spices, which this clearly Indian man sells. Seems a bit odd in this game, but the music that plays when you talk to him is fucking awesome. With it, we're going to make some curry, which Sakura apparently loves. I get it, man. I make chicken curry like twice a month. There's a tiny mini game to cook it, which is just selecting the correct order to do everything in, and if you just mashed A, you'd be right, because they put it all in order. Of course, he wasn't done messing around yet, though, because he left while we were cooking, and we have to go find him. He tells us that the reason he made us do all that was because our father made him do it as his first training exercise, so it was revenge. This might be the pettiest man I've ever seen. At least he gave us the labyrinth key finally. A quick labyrinth visit later, and we're ready for our next match, which is much easier this time around, and Sanri is starting to catch feelings. How cute. We've now made it to the semi-final, but there's still more than half of this game left. You didn't think it was just going to be a tournament arc, did you? Braun wants to come with us to meet up with our mom. Pretty obvious what his goals are. He tells us to go meet up with some old man that lives at the top of the city while we're doing it, just trying to get rid of us, and we're a stupid kid, so we head off. The old man knows us and our father and promises to tell us more about him if we return from the labyrinth with some dragon ore, and gives us the next key, so off we go. You also get the bestiary at this point, which doesn't have a lot of use, though if you do manage to completely fill it, you can get yourself a special weapon technique, which I'm not even going to have a chance at, but we'll see why later. The key goes to the door in the room with the glowing sword, and we meet the woman there again. She tells us that Shintetsu was a hero and sends us on our merry way. Since not a lot happens in this section, they give us a boss fight in the labyrinth against this robot, which isn't much of a challenge, and then we head back out to deliver the ore it was guarding. You have to walk back out here, and it even takes away one of the teleport points along the way, because you need to get back into the room with the sword where the lady is waiting to give it to you. This is called the Western Sword, and it's apparently a secret that has gotten out, so she's entrusting it with us, a 10-year-old kid. Amazing logic. On our way to deliver the ore, we find the old man, who is apparently named Master Rondo and the highest-ranking craft lord, being accosted by some soldiers of the rival nation Deglaya. We're going to fight them off for him, but I forgot to heal after I left the labyrinth, so thank God I saved, because that soldier killed me and then jumped for joy like a kid. Yay, child murderer! I beat him up on the second try, and the other two get rid of the rest. Sakura was with Rondo, telling him they lost track of some investigators a few days ago, and they send us off to ask Braun about the sword we were given. Clearly, the craft lords have something else going on, but they aren't trying to get a random kid involved right now. Rasho also knows what the sword is, and our mother is going to hold on to it for us. When we wake up the next day, Razzie comes in telling us someone washed up on the docks, so we're going to go investigate. The man has amnesia, and Amaris convinces us and Varel to carry him to her house. He remembers a vortex somewhere, and the kids all decide they're going to check it out. It sounds super dangerous, but Mom just smoked her daily joint, so she doesn't care what we do, and even suggests asking Braun to borrow a ship, who reluctantly agrees because Amaris was the one who asked. The ship even comes with a fully functional forge and a bed, which is sick. We obviously run into trouble near the vortex, and are attacked by a big mean fish, who's gonna run at us and spin his arms, and if we get hit, it's our fault.
I'm gonna be doing this. If you get hit, it's your own fault.
After that fight, we arrive at the island and set off to explore. Rasho also calls us a slave driver, which makes me even more uncomfortable with this situation. There are Deglayan soldiers guarding the entrance to the town here, so we go around and meet a girl from the island and Varel, who tell us Sanri and Razzie have been captured, but Varel is too hurt to help. The girls are in danger, so we're off to rescue them. The island girl tells us about a hidden path, and we set off. We then run into the village chief hiding, who has some, questionable priorities. On my way to the dungeon, I walked over to where the soldiers were, who catch me and bring us to a large summon creature, which apparently created the vortex. The soldiers say they were looking for a glowing sword, then our friends appear to help out, but we have to defeat the creature, starting a boss fight. This is what I was talking about when I said I would never be able to complete the bestiary. There is a whole dungeon here, but I'm not going to get to see any of it, because this is the final boss of the dungeon, and getting caught back there takes you straight to it, where if you win, you get to skip the dungeon entirely, including a scene where Sanri is being forced to wear a maid outfit by the guards and perform tasks for them. and you can choose to just stand by and watch as they slowly escalate what they ask her to do. That whole thing is a bit creepy, and I'm honestly not upset I missed it. I guess they somehow free themselves if you get caught. It was close, but I did manage to defeat the boss, and the guards all take off. The village chief thanks us and tells us he was hiding the sword the soldiers were after, and that there are 3 of them. The Eastern Sword was in his care, and he also independently decides that a child should be responsible for it now that he got into trouble over it a single time. What is with the adults in this game? We drop this one off with Amorous as well, who's at least somewhat responsible, and she tells us that Shintetsu's spirit is inside the sword. The next day, Sanori asks us to come watch her match, but before we can do that, we go up to meet with Master Rondo, where he's interrupted by another craft lord, Urexa. He wants to go to a volcano to check on some disturbances, and Rondo suggests bringing us with him. Sorry, Sanori, we can't really say no to this, so we're probably going to miss your match. On our way out, the lady shows up once again to give us some kind of cryptic warning about Urexa. Then we meet up with him where he starts asking us questions about a hero from Sagent. This won't mean anything to most Western players, but what this is actually doing is allowing you to choose which main character from the original Summon Night game is going to appear later in this one. I love this, and it fits in well enough with the game that if you don't know, it won't hurt your experience at all, but if you do, that's a really hype moment as a fan. Once we're done with that, we head off to Kagero Volcano, where Urexa decides he doesn't need us and pulls a Vegeta. This is where the character you unofficially chose earlier makes their debut, and since I'm a filthy American and I know nothing about those games, I ended up with Aya, who wakes us up and we go looking for Urexa. While going about it, we run into Chaves, who says Master Lubert asked him to go there and look for something, but he wants to fight again. He's obviously stronger than the first time, but not by much, and I easily defeated him. He angrily leaves, and we continue our search for the Craft Lord. We run into Aya again, who is spying on Urexa and Lubert. They're after another of Shintetsu's swords and plan to give it to the Deglyans. Urexa seems a bit unwilling, but he's definitely helping out in some kind of evil plot. Now we really need to catch up with them. This dungeon has some annoying teleporting puzzles, but at least I didn't skip it this time. The Craft Lords recognize Aya, but they still aren't afraid. Urexa is obsessed with the idea of being a hero, and when negotiations break down, Aya summons a big hippo monster and incapacitates them so we can continue looking for the sword. That didn't hold Urexa off for long though, and he confronts us. Surprisingly, Ninja Boy is a lance user, not a sword user, and his guardian beast is adorable. We defeat him, and he tells us the sword is at the bottom of the crater. Waiting for us there is a beat-up Aya and a summoner with a huge monster. You get the option to run away, which I'm not actually sure if that's a real option or not, but I chose to fight. Aya doesn't want to let you, but she doesn't really have a choice. This boss is actually tough too, and I needed to use multiple weapons to bring him down. He drops the Northern Sword, and then Aya wants to fulfill the promise she had made to us earlier of explaining a handover. That's gonna get dropped, but yeah, the original Summon Night is an isekai story, and she was going to explain a corporate handover to a 10-year-old child from another world. I'm sure that would have gone over great. When she walks off, Master Lubert comes back, who demands the sword be handed over, so we're going to fight him off too. But before the fight starts, the lady shows back up and gives us an opportunity to leave. We take it and run back to Mom's house with our sword between our legs. She takes the Northern Sword, but we did in fact miss Sanori's fight. We go off to apologize to her, but she's surprisingly understanding despite being a tsundere. I guess she's warming up to us a bit. Razzie says her fight was amazing, but that she was a little scary, and our character notes that something seems a bit off, but we don't know what. At night, Sanori laments to us then about how she felt like she was growing weak, and she doesn't want to turn into her sister. Then, in the morning, Razzie bursts in and begs us to go with her to Vance, and I choose to agree. Braun then tries to explain what's going on to our hero, but he doesn't get it. He somehow didn't even know that Razzie was a girl until this point. There's another earthquake right before we leave, and when we arrive, we're told that the Deglyan soldiers have recently arrived on Vance. Apparently passports do not exist in this world. We make the delivery real quick, and then learn from the shopkeep that Urexa lives here with his sister, who is ill. Naturally, that means Razzie wants to go visit his house. She doesn't know what he's involved in. We get caught peeking inside the house by the sister, and she invites us in to have a chat. Her name is Rumari, and while talking with her about Craft Lords, Razzie reminds us about the missing Tiram, who literally hasn't come up for like 7 hours of playtime by now. Tiram happens to be Rumari's lover, and she tells us about her pendant that is split into 3 pieces, one for her, one for Tiram, and one for her brother Urexa. She says it's a gift with the promise that the 3 will put the pieces together one day and live happily. Live happily? What is this, some kind of weird brother-sister throuple they've got going on? Actually, you know what? I don't want to know. It's time to leave. On the way out, Rasho thanks Rumari for not telling our character the whole story of Shintetsu, as she's apparently aware of what happened to him, and we head back to Wistern. Razzie wants to talk about Rumari with Sakuro, and he immediately tells us not to get involved or we will die just like our father. This is serious business, unlike all the other things he let us do, like sailing off into a vortex and fighting soldiers from an enemy nation. But fuck that, we're literally going straight back there. He can't tell us what to do. Sanori is coming too, without much of a reason. She's just bored, I guess. Sanori tells us that Rumari was the previous Craft Lord of Jade, and is friends with her sister, but they saw Urexa go towards the lighthouse on the way there, so we're gonna check that out instead. And Razzie and Sanori have both been captured already. Again. This is like a Princess Peach situation. It must be some kind of fetish. Off we go to rescue them then. This is a standard dungeon, but the Wind Dog enemies are pretty cute. Let's kill as many as we can. On the way up, we run into an ambush set by Lubert. The soldiers take us to the same holding area where Razzie and Sanori are, and an unknown man. Razzie recognizes him immediately as the missing Tiram, who says he's been trapped here for a month after looking into what was going on with Lubert and Urexa. He also tells us that the 3 swords that we've been collecting were created to seal the Holy Spirit of Fire, Parista, but he doesn't know why they want them, and says that Rumari's illness was caused by Parista, so that's most likely why Urexa is involved, yet seems so hesitant about it all the time. Parista is located at the bottom of the labyrinth, and right when we learn that, Varel appears out of nowhere. He says he came here to rescue Tiram and the 3 idiots at the behest of Sakuro, who knew we weren't going to listen to him. At the top of the lighthouse, we get cornered by Urexa, who wants to fight Tiram, but when offered the choice, we decide to step in instead. Time to beat this guy up again, and by beat him up, I mean drill his weapon into dust and steal it. Urexa's goal was apparently to defeat Parista, and he was planning to double-cross the Deglyans. Then the lady appears, and Tiram finally reveals that she is Korin, the one Craft Lord we haven't officially met yet. And from that, Urexa surmises that literally everyone in the Craft Lords knew what he was up to the entire time. And yet they still let us snoop around constantly in places they would know he was. Seriously, they are trying to kill kids. Urexa then walks over to the edge of the lighthouse, and now desperate, Korin tells him that Tiram was looking into Kuhira, the spirit of ice, which does get his attention, but his mind is lost and he makes the leap. Pretty heavy for a kid's game. We agree that someone needs to tell Rumari what happened, and I choose to be the one to do it. She wants to come to the port to talk to the other Craft Lords, and Tiram tells her that he is staying in Vance with her. Korin asks us to let them handle Parista and walks off. Sanori then wants to talk alone and says that her sister is Korin. Not very surprising with the way she kept bringing her sister up, but then she also apologizes for something, but she won't tell us what, just that it might already be too late. The next morning, Sakuro arrives and is going to give us some information. We can tell him no, but I say yes, and he gives us the next labyrinth key to prepare, and says he'll meet us at the docks when we're ready. I'm taking that as a sign and heading off to the labyrinth first, and then let's craft some weapons. Oh, the murder pole. You gave a child the technique for a weapon you call the murder pole. What a world this is. Once that's done, I'm off to meet up with Mr. Handsome. He tells us we're heading to Fort Mirana, a Deglyan fortress. So I guess he's giving up on us not getting involved. Varel also crashes the party because he wants to come with. So we all head out and get caught on the way by a patrol boat. But luckily, it apparently isn't too far of a swim to shore. So Sakuro is going to lure them away while we swim to the foreign military base while loaded down with a bunch of weapons on our backs. Yeah, he's a genius. No one seems to be around, so we're going to snoop. Remember when this game was about fighting in a tournament? Gotta love JRPGs. Eventually we run into Lubert, who is looking for us, so why don't we walk right up to them? He doesn't have time for us though, and just sicks some soldiers on us, which are really easy at this point. Now the chase is on for Lubert at the docks. We catch him there, and we're actually gonna fight him this time. He does a lot of damage and uses a drill, so he's an actual challenge like we haven't seen in this game since Razzie. I managed to get him after using all my heals, and then Sakuro shows up to arrest him. He reveals that inside a crate he had a portion of Parista, which Deglia was going to use as a war machine. An earthquake then breaks out that releases it, and Lubert is crushed to death, while Sakuro is wounded, so we have to fight the piece of Parista, fresh off the fight with Lubert, so I have no healing. His attacks are thankfully really easy to dodge, and I whittled him down with Urex's spear and finished him off with an axe. Time to hightail it out of there. Everyone involved with the Deglians is now dead, and we picked up the last sword while we were there as well. Sanri invites us out on a date that night, so in the morning that's what we're up to. Korin shows up, which upsets Sanri, as she's been complaining about her sister and Rumari becoming weaker after falling in love, and she doesn't want the same fate for herself. Cut to us receiving our next match notice, and of course, it's Sanri. She invites us to Braun's room to show us something, where she presents a glowing weapon that Braun says is on par with a Craft Lord's weapon. Once she leaves, Braun says that should be impossible, but it's whatever, I guess. I mean, who cares, right? Then he sends us on a journey to get a new hammer, our father's hammer, which is currently held by Master Rondo. Go home! Okay, old man, damn, we just got here. Rondo tells us our spirit is weak, and that Sakuro has the hammer, so the fetch quest continues. Hopefully we aren't fetching any more insults. Sakuro is in the Craft Lord's quarters, and also thinks that Sanri's improvement was too quick. He takes us to his house and hands us the hammer, where we learn that the real tool is our heart, or some other JRPG nonsense, and leave having wasted everyone's time. While in the labyrinth before the face-off with Sanri, I unlocked Rasho's ultimate spell, Flare Volcano, which took me multiple tries to use because it takes forever to go off, and if you get hit at all, the cast gets interrupted. It does do a lot of damage and looks pretty cool, but I don't know how you could ever use it reliably with how difficult it is to use. There's another earthquake as we head in to face her, and the fight itself is actually really easy. I forced her into a corner early and pretty much never let her go. She wants to see the weapon that defeated her, and then starts talking strangely, says help me, and disappears into the labyrinth, taking my weapon, you bitch! Then Korin appears and brings us to the other Craft Lords, who are already with Razzie and Varel. Sakuro tells us that the earthquakes are caused by Parista's awakening, and that even Shintetsu's swords could not stop it now. Apparently the humans have angered it, and it cannot be reconciled, which is why they sealed it away. Varel takes off to get ready for his semifinals match, and the Craft Lords forbid us from helping in this matter. They also let us know that the whole reason the tournament was started was to keep people from panicking about the ongoing situation with Parista. They're banning all access to the labyrinth until the situation is resolved, but the children yearn for the mines! We aren't going to stand around, we're going right in there. Varel is a bit upset that we're not going to fight him in the finals, but we don't care about that. A little sneaking around in the Craft Lord's quarters gets us into the labyrinth thanks to some help from the amnesiac from earlier. But waiting at the entrance are Braun and the leader of the Gold Guild, who have already stopped Razzie at the same entrance. It's Braun though, so he doesn't really give a shit and lets us pass anyway. I'm not sure if he'd be a good parent or not. Once we get deep into the labyrinth, who do we find on his knees again but Sakuro, fallen at the hands of Urexa? How the hell did that guy survive jumping off a lighthouse? Well, apparently he's being controlled by Parista, who kept him alive. I whipped out the drill and went for his weapon because I've been using his previous spear for hours, and that's how I beat him here. After we win, Sakuro tells us that Sanri is also being manipulated by Parista, which is kinda obvious, but little Nick here is a bit of a dumbass and needs things spelled out for him all the time. He says that was a trap to lure us down there, but that just strengthens our resolve to save her. Further down, we find her with a giant monster that is Parista, who speaks in Old English for some reason. We get into a fight with him right away, but we can't do any damage to him with our weapons. That's when Varel busts in to help us escape, and Sanri gives us a summoning gem. We wake up in a bed in the labyrinth, and with us is Kuhira, the ice spirit mentioned earlier, and Razzie, of course, because she has a knack for finding beds in the labyrinth and ignoring authority. Kuhira was summoned by Shintetsu and is the brother of Parista. He had planned to use Kuhira to send Parista back to his world, but he was never able to and kept the plan hidden from everyone else for no reason whatsoever. Parista was summoned as a guardian beast a long time ago to help create weapons for wars, and was imprisoned for this in the city of Wistern, which was created specifically for that purpose. So again, this whole summoning thing is completely fucked up. I can't believe people know all this and still think it's just totally cool. Parista has to be returned to his homeworld, and we learn that Shintetsu used his own soul as the material for the swords we've been collecting, which is how he actually died. Kuhira has been waiting for us deep in the labyrinth to tell us this. We can forge a weapon capable of defeating Parista with the gem Sanori gave us, and the soul of our guardian beast. Rasho agrees to give his life, but you actually get to decide here. This is not a cop-out. You can choose to sacrifice your guardian beast. But I choose to ask if there's another way, and Kuhira says with the 4 swords, we can create a weaker weapon that is still strong enough to win. We thought there were 3, but he'd been keeping the 4th a secret. Some secret, dude. They're literally named after the cardinal directions. Why would there not be a 4th one? We have to go get the swords from Amorous then, and Rasho thanks us for not being willing to sacrifice his soul. Amorous is getting accosted by Deglayan soldiers when we get there, but she gives them a good motherly scolding, and then has us fight them off. Seriously, she's definitely high. Braun shows up to take care of the rest while we go get the swords. We come out, and the last soldier runs off. Time to return for the final battle. Wouldn't be a real JRPG without fighting a god of some kind. When you return with the swords, Kuhira says this is the path our father wanted us to take, and we get to choose what weapon type we want to make. I chose a drill and go off to face Parista. The special weapon glows blue and looks pretty neat, but the battle itself isn't that difficult. The attacks are pretty easy to dodge, and you can't lose from weapon durability. Parista tells us that Sanori took his power willingly and is providing his strength, which leads us into the second phase of the fight. So obviously this must have been what she wanted to apologize about before, but it was already too late. She had already taken his power. This phase has attacks that are much harder to dodge, but it's still not that hard. With that, the weapon becomes the swords again, and Kuhira shows up to take Parista away. Sanori is returned to normal, and we cut to credits. After the credits, everyone thanks you for saving the day, and they send you into the tournament finals against Veril, but for whatever reason, they don't actually let you play it, and we cut straight to the ending that's determined by who you hung out with on the last day you got the option, so it's with Sanori for me. They're on a date, and we get one final look at the labyrinth, opening up some extra floors. For the post-game, you can fight everyone that was in the tournament to try and get their weapons, though they aren't scaled up at all, so it'll be really easy. And there's an extra 50 floors or so of the labyrinth with harder boss fights that you can take on, and stronger weapon techniques to learn, and a super boss fight at the end. That kind of thing doesn't really appeal to me, but if you really wanted more out of the game after about 12 hours or so to beat it, it's there for you to enjoy. This game is a ton of fun, especially for a GBA game that was limited by its platform, and it's a real shame that the main series never made it over here, as I can definitely see an audience for it with the success of things like Fire Emblem in the West. I definitely would have been interested in checking it out if I had actually had the option to. There is a sequel to this game that we did get, which is very different, and I may play for another video later on, but the third game in the Swordcraft Story series was never localized, so I don't know much about it. It's really difficult to find information about the series in general in English, since it's so inaccessible. But I know there are dedicated fans out there that have probably made a full English patch, though I had some trouble finding one that worked. Summon Night 5 and 6 are available in English, but from what I understand, they aren't considered to be that good by fans of the series, especially the 6th one. I definitely recommend you check out the Swordcraft Story series for yourself though, and considering it's GBA, it's not hard to get your hands on. That being said, if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like or subscribe to see more content like this. Also, leave a comment if you know more about this series and can direct me to an English patch for the first game. See you next time.